Right. Welcome, welcome. We are recording and starting the webinar. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome back to STEP. Um, yeah, like always, we'll do a little STEP intro and then we'll get into our partner presentation. But thank you all for being here and for being here throughout the summer. We'll skip this one because I think everybody's registered for STEP. Yeah, we have only a few more handful left of webinars left for the summer. Today, getting jobs and getting involved. And then next week, we have Meet the Transfer Hub. So the Transfer Hub will finally do our presentation on what type of services and programs we have. And then it's also an opportunity to get your final questions answered. Research and involvement series. We also have our last session on the 28th on experiential learning. So internships, UCDC, and more of their services. A lot more ways to get involved apart from research and from study abroad. And we're going to skip to peer coaching. So again, as always, the Transfer Hub has transfer peer coaches that are available to meet with you starting, now. We have four peer coaches available to meet with this summer. And then once fall quarter starts, we will have a whole team of at least 10 peer coaches that you can meet with. Again, peer coaches are available this summer. They have all completed at least 3 full quarters at UCSD. And then all our peer coaches are trained on giving you advice and also just referring you to resources and other support on campus if needed. And then because we're coming to the end of our program, we have an end of step survey. If you did the midpoint survey, it's very similar and we have the same prizes. So set of AirPods, UCSD sweatshirts, and Hydro Flasks. So if you've interacted with STEP in any way, maybe you watched a transfer talk, maybe you watched a STEP YouTube video recording, or maybe you read the STEP recap page, the notes, whatever way you have interacted with STEP, you're eligible to take the survey. We are going to have all the prizes available for the midpoint and end of survey in September. So just know that we're going to take some time to get through all of the survey participants. But yeah, for that QR code, yeah, our end of step survey. And then I'll also put it in the chat once I stop sharing my screen. As always, for our webinar today, you can use the Q&A feature on Zoom. Our chat is disabled, so you won't be able to put things in the chat, but you can submit questions in the Q&A feature. And we're hoping to have some time set aside at the end if there's any questions that you might have. And with that, I'm going to hand it over. Today's topic is getting jobs and getting involved, and I'm going to hand it over to Ron Reyes from the Career Center.
All right, thank you for that. Let me just hopefully get the presentation up and running so that everybody can see it. Um, here, I'll do this just to make it a little bit easier. Actually, here. So, hi everyone. My name is Ron Reyes. I'm one of the career specialists here at UC San Diego at the Career Center. My main area is supporting students with pre-health and pre-med journeys. However, besides that, I've also been a previous hiring manager and worked with several other programs. And so I'm very excited to talk to you about, essentially early career strategies, building experience, and working towards, how do we get our first jobs or experiences here at UCSD or while we're finishing up our education. So, with that in mind, I'll review very quickly just some things to note about the Career Center and some of its resources that you could leverage. We'll go over some strategies, talk about the search, some professionalism and networking skills that are helpful for securing early experiences, and hopefully some time for Q&A. So, Just to give you a breakdown, the Career Center covers a wide range of support for students, whether you are somebody studying in a STEM or non-STEM field or looking at graduate education. We do have dedicated staff members that focus on those different areas to support you with looking at building early experience and working towards different industries and areas of professional development. So as part of what you're trying to, do with hopefully pursuing your education is to continue on to future work opportunities. So while you're with us, some of the things that we hope students do are consider some of the resources that we do year round. So first thing I'm letting everybody know is that if you are trying to look for work or get an idea of different professional tracks, we do have our career and graduate school fairs coming up in the fall. That's a really good opportunity for students to see what kind of work opportunities there are. If you are looking at doing graduate school, you get to talk with admissions. And so it's very helpful to kind of understand very early what are some of the targets or things that they're hoping to see from our students. Besides that, we also do um, you know, one-on-one support and drop-in advising both before the fair and throughout the year. And so we try and incorporate both hands-on direct experience with our employers as well as training and support to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. So that shows up in the form of professional development and information sessions. And we even have employers that will sometimes run interviews for positions right here on campus, a lot of times utilizing the Career Center for their interview space. And then besides that, I'll also go over some resources that should help you in your initial, job search strategy and career development. So some things that you are going to see while you are here at UCSD that are resources for you when it comes to career. Handshake is how you schedule appointments with us. It's how you sign up for events. It's also how you see targeted job descriptions and posts for opportunities that are geared towards current college students and recent grads. So it's a good place to see everything from on-campus jobs to off-campus and internship. Parker Dewey is an opportunity for micro internships, which I'll go over a little bit in a couple other slides. What can I do with this major is good for early career exploration. Firsthand gives you guides about different industries and what do their jobs look like. Going Global is a service that allows students to understand what the international job market looks like and even talks through for international students what expectations or resources are available when looking at the job market here in the US. So it goes both ways, both international and local. And then Big Interview is a service that students can log into to get additional interview support. So these are some on-demand access and support students have access to that I always want to make sure you're aware of as you start your experiential journey. So with that, we encourage students to make appointments with us, whether it's group advising or drop-in. That will be again in Handshake. You should be able to get through Handshake by using your single sign-on account. Once if your account isn't fully set up yet, it should be by the time the quarter starts. And then I highly encourage for both employers as well as for scheduling appointments to make sure you update your profile. It does try and pull some of the basic information in with your SSO, but it doesn't update a lot of it. So we always recommend that students take a time to put their information, their interests, maybe some skills that they are working on so that it can help when you get recommendations for jobs and opportunities. So transitioning into some strategies and thinking about career, we're going to start first with wanting to think through how do we understand what we're targeting, right? So, some questions somebody might want to ask themselves. What am I naturally good at? Um, what is my why with the type of work I want to do? Motivations, what do I value? Do I want to leave an impact in certain areas? We always encourage people to think of work as more than just a job because it's really about what do you want to get out of what you're doing, and there needs to be enough either motivation or interest for it to be worth it for you. Naturally speaking, I've been a hiring manager. If somebody is not a good fit for the job, they're just not going to do well. right? And so we want to make sure people are thinking about these things before they start really digging into the workplace and building experience. Or even better yet, as part of working on building experience, start thinking about, okay, what are the different ways I can, compare and look at fields or types of jobs and work, right? And so after you've done some self-exploration, it's always good to say, okay, based off those skills and my area of interest, maybe I use some of the Career Center resources. Let's look at what jobs are like, whether they're based off of title and description on LinkedIn or Handshake, just to start getting a feel for, is this something that I'm actually interested in, right? And then from there, continue to start looking at different opportunities that either highlight or develop those skills and activities that are helpful for what you want to do. And so a lot of this really comes down to planning ahead of time or being very mindful about your time and what you can do. So I always say pay attention to deadlines if we are currently active in a market. If we see qualifications and skills, which ones can I highlight? And, are there ways I can start working on things to develop those skills? Am I utilizing my resources so that I could talk with a career advisor or a peer educator at the Career Center about what I'm applying to and what are some things I can consider if I am targeting specific opportunities, right? And then as I'm sure you've mentioned from some of the opportunities, there's a wide range people can participate in outside of a formal job in order to build experience, right? So I have some students, they study abroad, some do internships, are leaders in student orgs, they do volunteer work. Maybe you had a part-time job in either retail or food services. That's all experience that's going to be valid and helpful. And so we want to start recontextualizing the different things that we do as opportunities to build experience or maybe leverage skills that can be applicable in different aspects. So when thinking about skills, I think it's also important to touch on, a hiring manager perspective. So really with the hiring trends, especially as of recent, it's more focused on looking at skills-based hiring nowadays. So based off of recent data, 70% of employers now use skills-based hiring. And really what that means is that we're looking during the interview as well as during application screening at, okay, what are the skill sets this person either it has or can develop that help make sure that they are qualified for the role? Now, if you're somebody that's had any challenges with GPA, or maybe you think the major is not a good fit, but you're really interested, this also means that you have opportunities to instead highlight the areas that are still going to be relevant and useful for the job, regardless of how that has happened in the past, either with major or academics. So it shows you just how important it is to communicate skills that are going to be in alignment with the work that you are going to be doing. So I can't stress that enough. Because sometimes students will say, well, my major isn't quite the same, or, I had a really bad quarter, and I know that is a helpful skill to have for, or that's helpful content to have for a specific job. I get that. I understand. But from a perspective of a hiring manager, the real question is, can you show it? How are you going to qualify based off of building these skills in either other capacities or other instances? So understanding that, we also have to break down skills into two buckets. Technical skills, which are, measurable, teachable. Usually it's everything from working on digital programs, social media, to certifications and formal training, right? So those are technical skills. And then we have professional skills. People might understand professional skills as transferable, interpersonal, behavioral. Um, Soft skills was the old term. We don't use that anymore because really it's professional skills that are transferable, right? And so those things are things you develop with building experience or have some natural qualities too, like teamwork, public speaking, time management, communication, etc. And so, really, the idea is as we start thinking about jobs and opportunities, we also want to start thinking about what skills are we going to communicate to help align ourselves with these different opportunities that come up. Or if we're looking at things like volunteering or unpaid positions, can we develop some of these skill sets while we are doing those activities so that future opportunities are easier for us to apply to. Touching on that, speaking of early opportunities for students, I do want to put a quick plug for micro internships. So, for my students that are interested in building up some technical skills or ways to demonstrate technical skills, I do want to highlight that we do have a partnership with Parker Dewey, which handles micro internships. So, micro internships, unlike a traditional internship, is typically a couple of weeks to maybe a month. It's project based, they're task oriented, and they are paying you for consultant work. So usually there's a flat rate of X amount of dollars, so like $500 for a project or so. And it's designed to be remote, flexible work where you can learn to try and do something or do a specific project on a trial basis. So it's very short term. I know some students, what they'll do is I've had some actually do multiple micro internships because it's a quick way to get some income, but it's also a resume builder for maybe some technical projects you want to include as you start applying to other places. So I just wanted to mention that because it is a newer opportunity for students that we have yet to fully leverage, and I highly encourage if we're talking technical skills alongside professional skills, it's a very quick way for you to build some of those. So, as far as going into the search, understanding some basic strategies, I first want to start off with talking about what does the professional job search strategy look like in the grand scheme of things. So, it's a cyclical process in a lot of ways. So, first we start off with, okay, what can I get involved in? What can I develop based off of my interests as far as resume, portfolio, cover letter, etc. Maybe updating my profile. Then I'm going to take all of that information and start working towards targeting either a specific industry or area that I want to build skills and work experience in. And so I work towards that. I hopefully will start putting myself out there and networking, looking for different opportunities, maybe do some practice mock interviews, and then start going to events or applying to places and looking for opportunities to work and go through that process of applying, right? Assuming I do build some level of experience, once I'm done with that, I'm going to do it all over again, right? I'm going to get involved. I'm going to work on my resume. I'm going to look at other opportunities to build experience. I'm going to follow up, find out about other opportunities, maybe have conversations with professionals, and continue to grow my experiences. So I want to remind everybody that when we're talking about job search, we're not talking about the one-time process. We're really talking about the strategy long term and the process of building either your portfolio or resume of work. So when we break it down, some key things to remember. We're going to identify our goals, motivations, and skills so that what we are targeting is grounded in deliverables or things that we are interested in. We'll want to research or look into what are jobs and companies that interest us or that provide experiences that we want to have. And then we're going to consider, are there opportunities to either build relationships or networks or check in with professionals in those areas so that we can increase both the visibility of us as applicants, but also get a better understanding of what kind of opportunities do exist and how do we want to go about that, right? So it helps us transition into seeking those early experiences. Once we have a handle on the industry, then it's a matter of saying, okay, how do I tailor my documents, my resume, my cover letter, my portfolio, so that as I start getting into the workplace, I'm really thinking about how I present myself. And then we continue to look at industry trends and what's going on with the job market or with looking at experience. I always like to remind students it's okay to ask for help. And in fact, I would encourage asking for help, checking in with the Career Center, attending events, and also think about how you start to come up with your own personal brand of who you are and what you want to do with the work you want to do. These are all kind of important aspects to think about and to incorporate as we start building experience. So part of that, just a friendly heads up, this is just a reminder of some of the resources that you can do utilize in this process. Handshake and LinkedIn are great for getting a profile and looking at opportunities. Indeed, Idealist, US Jobs, ZipRecruiter, CalJob All of these different portals and sites either give you job postings, job descriptions, or an understanding of different industries and fields, right? So I just like to remind people, well, we have this information published on the Career Center, but there's a lot of starting points for students to build experience. So if we want to go a little bit granular on thinking through how to explore work. So let's just say I'm very early in the process. I haven't had yet a chance to dive a little deeper into what I want to do. We can start breaking it down by evaluating what's going to be important for us, right? So maybe I'm going to try doing a LinkedIn search where I'm going to just put in a major or an area of study just to see what kind of job descriptions pop up and what skills are associated, right? For my students who like to use ChatGPT and AI, there are times and places to do that. This is one of them where you can get away with that, right? So maybe you want to just open a little chat bot and say, I am interested in, and then mixing your interests together and seeing what they say. So I could say, I am interested in being a software engineer, but I also like music and data science. Are there specific opportunities or jobs that combine these skills or areas of interest? And then maybe you'll find something that you weren't expecting, right? I had a student who realized that they love music and they're in engineering, and maybe they want to talk about sound engineering and what does that actually mean when it comes to working with companies like Sony, right? So you might find interesting combinations that are outside of what you would normally expect or see by trying to do these exercises where we really look at, what are the things that you value and are interested in and how they might intersect in the workplace. So, just to give you an example, we're in LinkedIn. Maybe I'm going to type in cognitive science. And then based off of that, I'm going to click on some of the jobs that are currently listed for it. And then I'm going to start reading through those opportunities and saying, okay, what are the skills? What is the job expectation? What is the type of work? And start thinking about, is that something that interests me, right? So on the initial investigation or thought process, this is how we can get started very quickly. So once we've identified some of our targets, then we can start thinking about, okay, I like this industry. Maybe I'll have a bucket of, okay, within this industry, there's a couple job types I'm going to work towards, right? And then we start creating a list of that as maybe an area that we're interested in. And so some students like to do this. I like to say it's a good exercise for a lot of people looking at industries. You can use the LAMP method. Very easy. Use an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Doc. List companies that interest you. Maybe use LinkedIn or Triton's Connect as a website to pull up are there alumni within that company, which might be people you want to reach out to. And then rank how motivated are you to potentially get an opportunity at that kind of company or business. And then maybe see how many postings for the jobs were listed for the last 3 months, right? Or you can prioritize how strongly do I feel about the job titles, right? On a scale of 1 to 3, 1 being lowest, 3 being highest, is this something where I'm very excited about the job postings or not? Right? So it's just a exercise to help you practice understanding what you're interested in and which areas you may want to focus on as you start doing some early career exploration and working towards industry and market jobs. So now that we've done that, we can start thinking through more formal strategies, right? So looking at the companies, looking at the job descriptions, maybe we're going to mill through some of those different listings to see, okay, what skills or experiences I have that are similar to that particular position, right? And then we'll want to either go through a resume or even have a document separately where we really kind of map out, okay, what are the most pertinent or important things that are going to be in alignment, right? And maybe that will be something that we think through. Another thing that might be helpful is, okay, maybe we like the type of job, but we don't know where those opportunities are going to align. So maybe instead on my search, I'm going to start searching for are there jobs with X skills involved? and that becomes a new way for me to kind of look for opportunities, right? So really just thinking through what are the different things we want to leverage with this information that we are collecting. And then once you have all that information, it should make it easier for you to customize your resume, target specific companies or places to apply to, or even try and have conversations with professionals that work at those organizations, right? So at the last part of the strategy is really customizing your approach to industries and jobs based off of what they are interested in and where you can find alignment. So I like to think of it, okay, let's just say we have a posting. All right. So let's break down what are the things about that we may or may not like or are interested in. So once they list the key duties and the day to day, which is very common on these postings, will I be happy or okay doing what is considered day to day operations for that job? When we're looking at skill sets, we might want to ask, do I feel qualified or do I feel that there are certain skills I need to work on to really land that position? If so, maybe I want to make a note of those skills and see either how I can highlight that on my resume, or if I have yet to be at that level, say it's a more advanced job position, are there activities or things that I can start looking for where I can develop those qualifications, right? Um, and then lastly, employment is very different across the spectrum, right? What kind of employment opportunity is this? Is this part-time? Is it full-time? Are there added benefits? Is this something that would make me happy, to start out working there? You now keep in mind you don't need to meet all of these different things with a job to feel good about applying to it, but these are important questions to ask as you start looking at different jobs and opportunities to evaluate what you're getting out of it and if it's worth giving it a shot, right? I always say if there's at least enough interest and you're starting out early, it is better to give it a shot and see if it works for you. And if not, you move on. But the more important thing is really to get into the habit of evaluating the work and being able to recognize how you can align yourself with work that interests you. So, the last component, and I think this is one of the biggest ones that people I know shy away from, is really developing networking and professional skills for purposes of the job market. It a lot of times it tends to be an area that I spend a lot of time helping students through. So, when really thinking about networking basics, this process is very human, right? Networking is actually a very mutually beneficial behavior for people to do. My background is actually in behavioral sciences, and I could say it is a very uh, positive thing that people want to develop or should develop, right? So networking, foundationally speaking, is inherently about being able to build relationships. They don't necessarily have to be your friend, but have these professional relationships where there's a sharing of information. There could be some level of mutual benefit to it. Maybe it's connected by either interest or things that you both can benefit from doing as an action together. And it's basically an opportunity for you to build some sort of network and structure of individuals that share some level of interest and are information resources and contacts that can help you develop as a human, as a professional. So, first thing I check in with everybody is, I get this. I like to ask my students this all the time when I'm teaching in class, which is on average, how long does it take to make an initial impression when you first meet somebody? I'll say, since this is a webinar, I'm just going to let you know some things I hear all the time. Oh, maybe a minute, or some students will say 10 seconds, or sometimes it says, I don't know, maybe within a second. It's actually within behavioral sciences, it's about 7 seconds. Now, that's initial impression. And so what I tell everybody is as we put ourselves into different social places, how we show up is how somebody develops an initial impression of who you are as a person. This is important when it comes to networking with professionals. It is important when doing interviews. And it's generally good to be aware of how we show up in the space because how we show up affects how people interact with us. So I always tell everybody treat every opportunity in any sort of networking space to practice professionalism, right? So whether it is every interaction on email, whether it's attending an event in person or virtually, how you show up is going to hinge their initial impression of who you are and if that's somebody that they want to be as part of their own network, right? Um, I always like to say, even if you feel like you might have came off wrong on the first impression, it's not necessarily all the impressions that they have of somebody, especially if we are in reoccurring spaces like resource centers or different community groups or organizations. So the other component to that is, yes, be aware of the first impression, but also how do you show up consistently, right? Like, there's the one time and then there's seeing somebody over a period of time. And both of those things are important factors to be aware of. So when it comes to building a network, I like to scaffold it a little bit for everybody. So really it starts with attending events, then thinking about, okay, what are some different professional organizations or groups I might want to be a part of? And then talking to people about those groups or industries, right? So asking for informational interviews. Sometimes they're called career conversations, but this is the early process of how you build a network of either professionals or future professionals for industries that you're interested in. So I always find this is kind of a good way to think about it. We're starting at the very foundational level, and we're slowly building our professional network, meeting after meeting, as we move along, right? And so really this starts with the basic things you already get access to, right? You're here, you're attending these webinars, you are part of a student community already. Meet up, talk with your fellow students and colleagues that are, transfer students for one. That's a great group of students that can understand each other. So why not see what groups can become your first networks here, right? Look at other programs and events, attend Career Center events. Think about faculty and upperclassmen that you might want to seek out as for mentors, right? And start integrating into different communities that make sense for you on campus, right? Some of my students love different affinity groups based off of, cultural background. I have other people who love hobbies, right? I could, some students will join like an anime group or a manga group or some sort of game group, right? But these are all different networks where you start to have at least an initial starting point of mutual interest, but then you can start checking in with each other to see how those interests kind of branch out into other communities. And if you don't know where to start, at least looking for professional networks, again, there's two sites that I mentioned, LinkedIn and Tritons Connect, right? So if I'm a person just trying to research what alumni are in certain industries, I can use LinkedIn for that. If I'm trying to find out what alumni have a separate social platform where they are willing to have a conversation about what they do with students, Tritons Connect is a great way to do that, right? Make an account, be able to log in and see what professionals in what fields are open to having a conversation with you about what they do. Either way, I always encourage people to start thinking about what questions would be great to actually ask of a professional and and just try reaching out. So when we do that, we're thinking about, again, informational interviews or career conversations. And really, it's to just give you additional opportunities to network with these professionals, right? And so it's usually low stakes. We ask for maybe 15 to 20 minutes of their time and come in to the conversation in mind that you're probably going to primarily ask a question or two and really listen to them about their experiences, and what their decisions and understanding is about a profession, right? And really, the good thing about that is it really gives you not only a better understanding of what they do, but if it's a positive experience, it ends up becoming a potential referral or professional who can help you along the way. So I have a little sample where you just introduce yourself, right? Hi, explain how you're connected. So I'm like a biology student, UCSC. I noticed we both know Professor so and so, or I see you're an alumni, and I too was part of Revelle College, right? Whatever connection that there is, and then see if they're open to chatting with you for 15 to 20 minutes about their profession, right? Um, And that's how it starts. It's very low stakes to do that. And the other thing I like to remind everybody when we're thinking about this, if I were an alum and I had somebody who shared a connection to something that I did in my undergrad, and they showed valid or genuine interest in what I do, I probably would be fine saying, sure, let's talk for 15 to 20 minutes over the phone. Most of the time, no, it feels good to be asked about what you do, especially when you do it really well. And so, selfishly, yeah, there is some joy to that where they will more likely than not be more open to that if you're really approaching it from a genuine interest in their profession. So, some reasons behind why I push this so much for students to give you an idea based off of data and studies. 92% of recruiters search for candidates on sites like LinkedIn. 80% of professionals consider networking to be critical for their success, really. 76 respondents cite that strong networks is how they got ahead. And about 31% of professionals were hired from a company based off of professional connections that they've developed. Also, specifically to LinkedIn, 35% of respondents found that within casual conversations, it led to a new work opportunity. I can comfortably say from my personal history working in higher education for about almost 2 decades now that a majority of my opportunities came from either somebody referring me to a job posting or even asking me to apply based off of being part of different professional networks. So I can attest to these numbers being pretty consistent. So, as a reminder, when it comes to really working towards getting a job and building a professional network, give yourself grace. It is a ongoing process. It's not perfect, and we're going to have to do this iteratively, like I had mentioned before. Um, we want to still consider everything as an opportunity to develop as a professional. So that, again, continual skills development is a mindset that's going to be helpful, and that career paths are often not linear. So we're going to try some experiences. If it doesn't work out, or maybe it's not a good fit, we try other ones. We go back to the drawing board, apply to different positions and opportunities, right? But where we land is going to be a culmination of our different efforts that we've put out there to kind of understand where our skills lie. And then lastly, I would say focused on just building opportunities as they come up and as you're able to, right? You're still students here, but that doesn't mean that you can't have experiences through a student org that you get a part, some work with, or maybe you do some volunteer work on the weekends, or maybe there's a part-time job on campus that lets you get to know a department really well, right? Uh, Early experiences are incredibly helpful. And we want to acknowledge, even if it's not what we want to do in the long run, it does help prepare us by building those transferable skills moving forward. So that's kind of a basic breakdown of what I think about when it comes to early strategies while you are here. But I wanted to try and give some time for everybody so that we could just answer questions and talk through maybe things that you're thinking about with experience and career. Um, so at this point, I think we can go ahead and transition to the Q&A section. And then let me see if I could pull up
Okay.
our questions.
You do have two questions. I can read
Okay.
them to you if you'd
Oh,
like.
perfect. Thank you. That would make it
Okay.
easier. Or I'll just stop.
Yes.
I could stop sharing since it's just
Okay.
a little Q&A slide.
There you go.
Um, all right.
We
So,
have a
yeah. Mhm.
question that asks, it's probably like closer to the beginning of your presentation. You mentioned it. When is the career fair in fall 2026?
So I have a calendar hold on that. So I will tell you right now. Uh, I believe the fair is on the books for Lion Tree Arena October 7th on a Wednesday. And then besides that, we do have also two graduate fairs the following month that just got put onto the book. So I'll also mention that because that is an opportunity for graduate school. And so in November, we'll also have on Library Walk uh, law business, and general graduate school admissions on November 4th. And then my industry partners Health, Medical Sciences, and STEM Graduate Career Fair the following day, November 5th on Library Walk. So we'll have three big fairs in fall. Again, the first one for like student opportunities and our big career fair in Lion Tree. And then in November, we'll do our graduate schools. Mhm.
Nice. And to clarify, career fair and job fair, are those like terms interchangeable? Like,
Typically,
yeah, okay.
I usually like to say career fair is a little bit more appropriate just because, it might not always be a specific job or internship. Sometimes it's just literally an industry partner who says, we're not hiring right now, but we want to introduce ourselves because our hiring cycle starts in 2 months, or a month, or in 3 weeks. And we want to make sure that people know or have an opportunity to talk with us about what those opportunities are, what our expectations are, or ask questions about our company, right? And so it's not that every single one of them is hiring right that very moment, but a lot of them are planning to hire in a short period of time from the career fair. So it's a really good way to get ahead and find out who is doing what within different industries. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Um, let's see. There's a question. I'll go with the long one for
Mhm.
now. When looking for on-campus job opportunities at UCSD, is
Mhm.
it better to check online listings or is there an option to ask in person? They prefer face-to-face interaction, so to ask questions directly rather than relying solely on online info.
Mhm. I would say it really depends on the department, right? So for example, housing and dining, it would be really hard to find where their administrative office for that specific job is because they're so spread out on campus, right? But if we're talking, say, a student position at a resource center or with a specific department, most departments are going to be happy to talk to you about the positions that they have. So if that is something you're interested in, it doesn't hurt to say, I'm a student with this background. I was really hoping that there might be opportunities in the upcoming year for to work as a student at your, department or resource center. Is that something that I can look into, or do you have any recommendations? Usually they're fine to answer questions. I mean, we hire student staff here at the Career Center. If somebody's interested, we'll let them know what our hiring cycle looks like. Um, and it's also based off of how the department gets funding and budget, right? And so sometimes they do want to hire you guys, they just have to wait,
Mhm.
right? So it doesn't hurt to get ahead of it and say, I'm really interested, or are there things I can be a part of or get involved with so that when those other opportunities come up, I'm already working with you, right? So I always say it doesn't hurt to ask, especially for the on-campus jobs, because most of us are pretty aware. And we wouldn't mind, answering those questions if you're like truly interested in working with our departments. Yeah.
All right. Another question is what's the difference between a CV and a resume? Kind of big question.
Okay, I'll give you the basics, and then I would really strongly suggest if it applies to you, show up to one of our workshops that we do on these things on the regular. We usually do resume and CV workshops about 2 to 3 times a year at a minimum. I would say it's been closer to 4 times a year or more because a lot of people need help with it. So, uh, CV, curriculum vitae, at least for a US context, is typically specific to academia or positions related to academia and research. And so we usually don't see curriculum vitae much until we really get into like grad level and above academics or maybe scientist positions. Um, Most other places are going to rely heavily on what I would say is our US standard industry format, which is resume, which is, a highlight of 1 to 2 pages of history for earlier career applicants and maybe 3 to 4 if we're talking like my seasoned, 20 years in the field director, right? And so resumes can go past a couple pages, but it's usually equivalent to, how high up and longitudinally they've had as a career and if it makes sense for what they're applying for. Versus CV, you could be a PhD student and your CV could already be like 15 pages, right? Because it's literally everything that is around academics, research, publications, teaching, um, projects, grants, conferences. It is a wide range of information for CV. And the kind of running joke is resume 1 to 2 pages, CV as long as it takes, right? They're very different, but they're usually for specific contexts. So hopefully that gives you a good starting point. Majority of students are going to need resumes over CV.
And also to add, Ron also did a resume workshop for us a couple of weeks ago. Last Friday? No, 2 Fridays ago.
Mhm.
And it's recorded and it's on our Transfer Hub website. So we also have access to that one too. It's the most recent one. Um,
Yes.
there is another question, which is I'm going to reword it. What can we expect at the career fair and how can we impress a company?
Couple different things. So it's the first off, the event is massive. I'd say we usually have somewhere between 150 to 200 employers tabling at our career fair. Usually we have about like 3 to 4 entry blocks or sign up blocks for the fair, which means that, students will be coming in maybe 1,000 at a time. And really, it's an opportunity to see who's actively recruiting or trying to work with UCSD students. So I always say if you can get a chance to check out the career fair website early, you can usually find out what areas or who is potentially recruiting, and then utilize that information to come up with a game plan of what companies do I want to try and spend my time getting in front of to ask questions or get to know. A lot of students do like to be more mindful of their attire at a career fair. So if you can show up with like a button up and jeans, that'd be great. They understand you're in class. That doesn't always happen, but if you really want to impress them, sometimes being a little nicer dressed, ready for kind of business casual would be can be impressive sometimes for them to say like, oh wow, this person really came in ready to go. Other things that can be helpful: attend a resume workshop before, and then show up with maybe some targeted resumes in hand if you know that there are certain companies you're really trying to shoot for right out the gate, right? That can be very thoughtful and targeted. You might not always get to talk to them about your resume. Sometimes they'll just like collect it and then they'll be answering questions as a group. But I would say those are some key things to be thoughtful of with your time. The other thing that I tell everybody is it can be very worth it to not always just go with like a couple big names, right? Like there's always going to be like 5 to 10 companies that have massive lines because they're really well known. That's great. However, if you only have about an hour, I would take some time to hit up all the other companies out there, right? If there's 150 to 200 companies, um, it would behoove you to at least get in front of certain companies in different areas that you're interested in, because maybe the one without a giant line might actually have opportunities that you can apply to really quickly, right? Or you can get a good conversation with one of them, kind of hit up everybody else, and if you still have time to wait in a long line for 30 minutes, maybe then you want to wait for one of these bigger companies that have massive lines. So I always say be mindful of that when you're at the career fair. Really be aware that every company there generally wants to be there, and so we should leverage that fact.
Awesome. Another question is, are all on-campus student jobs posted on Handshake? And does federal study take top priority if there are an abundance of qualified applicants?
The answer is it depends on the position, right? I would say a majority of positions are going to be on Handshake regardless, because we work very closely with student employment. So the expectation is if it's in a student, a job that is in partnership with our on-campus student employment, it's going to go on Handshake. If it's maybe unpaid and something that a department is running offsite, it might be not in Handshake, but chances are a majority of opportunities are going to be on Handshake. If you are somebody that is federal work study eligible, there's even ways to do filters and searches to double check if it's a position that prefers federal work study. And the reason why it might prefer federal work study, it just means that they have slightly more budget to work with when it comes to hiring students or giving you guys more hours. So it doesn't necessarily always dictate that somebody will get prioritized because they have federal work study, but there is a financial benefit to hiring more federal work study students because they get additional funding to make sure that you guys get working hours.
Gotcha. And yeah, I can also attest to like the transfer hub when we recruit student assistants or student staff, we tend to um, say we prefer federal work study. But if you don't have it, that doesn't necessarily automatically, disqualify you in as a candidate. And I know that other offices on campus because their budget is so limited, they have to only hire work study student staff. So yeah, just as an example to add on to what Ron said. Yeah. And
And then
then
sometimes there's also labs that don't need work study because it's a completely separate budget and grant, right? So some lab positions that are technically on campus may not even list it just because they have a certain budget. They have so X amount of students that they can hire for a project, and work study or not, they just have grant money set aside. So again, it depends, but for a lot of places, work study does make it a little bit easier for them to give you guys more hours.
some a couple more questions on federal work paid
Mhm.
work federal work study. One is, and you talked a little bit about this, but if you're granted federal work study, it should show on your financial aid award letter, and that is based on your FAFSA application. So if there's any students that like don't have federal work study as part of their aid package, there's no way of like getting that. That's just automatically like calculated based on their FAFSA. And it's more of a financial aid question, but
It's more of like you will be notified if you are eligible. And then if you are eligible, you should receive some sort of, internal messaging that confirms it. The other thing is, especially with on-campus employment, I used to work a lot with a lot of on-campus employment. Um, Part of the initial paperwork when you sign up for a job on campus is if you're federal work study eligible, they'll request that you provide confirmation that one, you want to use your work study for that position, and that two, to please provide so and so letter or confirmation that they have that was given to you at the beginning of the funding year.
awesome. And will there be federal work study opportunities in the career fair? Do you happen to know? And then there's, I guess, there's a question on a list of companies attending that career fair and how students will know if those positions will be listed ahead of time.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
So I would say, as far as it really depends, if we have any, because I haven't checked signups. Signups are open to everybody, including on-campus employment. So it really just depends on if there's a specific department or two. Usually we have at least one or two departments that want to show up for the career fair. But it's really dependent on if there's a department or two that happens to line up pretty well. A lot of times we do have a student employment table, which would include on-campus jobs at the career fair. So that's very popular that we usually have that. And then besides that, as far as list of companies, usually when a student registers, they're able to pull up a list of who's currently registered as a company on the fair. I will say we've also had companies show up and register like a week leading up to the fair. So I always say don't assume, what we see one week is going to be it because we do have employers that either sign up late or don't get approved to table until a couple weeks into the academic quarter, and then suddenly they're there at the fair. So you can usually days leading up to the fair, there's not that many changes, so that's when it's the best time to kind of look it up on the event.
All right. Awesome. I think those are all of our questions for now. Yeah, that are related to getting jobs. There's another question about the financial website being down for 2 weeks. Um, I'm not sure when it'll open again. I can check that really quick to see if I know financial aid sometimes has office hours, but I can check really to ongoing maintenance. It does say on the website that ongoing maintenance through August 28th. So I think that will end on Friday. It says right on the website. So I think that's when maintenance will be done. All right. There was one last question. I think it was more so like towards the beginning of your presentation of like trying your suggestion of trying different jobs anyway.
Mhm. Yeah. So I always like to say you never know what you're going to end up with. So if there is something that gives you a skill that you're interested in developing, maybe it ha is related to either a topic or an area that you have some curiosity about, or maybe you just like the staff or people and you want to give it a shot, right? It's always worth applying and seeing if it works for you, right? Worst case scenario, you learn from it, that's not my thing. And I move on. I've had students before where they applied to a lab thinking it's something that they're interested in. They get to doing wet lab work and they hate it. And that's okay. That just means that they're going to move on and find other work that is better in line with what they are. But what they can do is with those experiences that maybe weren't a good fit, maybe they still developed a skill or learned about an area that really told them what they really want to do versus what they don't want to do. I always think no experience is wasted as long as we're very thoughtful about what have we learned or gotten out of this experience, or what are the things I've been able to develop or understand because I've taken the time to figure it out. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Ron. I think that a lot of this information is going to be very helpful for the job search, search in the future. And thanks for answering all of our questions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course.
and thanks for step participants. We're almost done. Let me put our end of step survey in the chat just one more time. We're going to be having prizes for yeah, any participants that complete the survey. But I will end the webinar here. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening. Okay, bye.